This is a plea to the freedom protesters, the politicians, and the news media. Please stop embarrassing New Zealand.
Tonight on One News, police and anti-mandate protesters clash on Parliament's forecourt. Arrest after arrest after arrest as the remaining group defies trespass warnings. Why they're vowing to stay for the long haul.
Firstly, to the protesters. Protest peacefully. You have a valid point to make, and the best way to have it heard is to be persistent with a peaceful protest. Perseverance will be more effective than violence. Violence will be antithetical to your cause. We should not want to mimic the United States January 6 Capitol riots. Americans generally are not proud of that, and for us to make the same mistake after being able to learn from theirs would be doubly embarrassing. To the politicians, how can you be so intentionally ignorant to the dissatisfaction of your people? Whether or not you sympathize with the protesters at your door is irrelevant. There is a clear polarization of belief in our community. It's part of your job to communicate with the people. In case you need reminding, New Zealand is a representative democracy. People are trying to communicate to you that your mandates are undemocratic. The solution is simple. At once, you should announce a government-initiated referendum to let the public have their say on vaccine mandates, vaccine passports, mask mandates, and lockdowns.
But I'm still reminded that relative to the people that are at Parliament now, on the very day that they're there, tens of thousands of people went out and got vaccinated. It is not reflective of where the rest of New Zealand is at right now.
Seeing as our Prime Minister is so confident the protesters are not a generalisable indication of New Zealand as a whole, what do you have to lose? A referendum will let the people know that the government is acting with the consent of the people. After all, the legitimacy of the government is derived from the consent of the governed. Now to the worst offenders, the news media. For those unfamiliar with New Zealand's news channels, just know that One News is the biggest daily news channel and, as of late, it's turned into a propaganda machine. Unfortunately, it's all too normal for news outlets to be biased to one or another political side, and One News is no exception. Recently, its main stories have followed a trend of one-sided exaggeration and fear-mongering, usually starting with a dramatic COVID update.
Kia ora, good evening. The South Auckland hospital that's treated more COVID cases than any in the country says the anticipated Omicron surge is now underway in its community.
Followed by one or two anecdotes to drive the point home.
Kiwi Angela contracted Omicron 5 weeks ago.
I was not technically sick enough to go to hospital, although at one point I was coughing so deeply that I was spitting up blood.
Then a condescending take on the freedom protests, which are analogous to protests happening all over the world recently, including the one currently raging in Canada.
Picked off one by one. Police stepped up their presence at Parliament again today. 120 people arrested today alone. So many they had to be transported in this supersized truck.
A quick note on the police. One News shows quite standard arrests. However, when looking through other news channels, it's easy to find more excessive uses of force coming from the police.
The police have turned up and used appropriate force to this point. They're not there with batons, they're not there with shields, and so I would have thought that the police are looking pretty good out of this.
I do not envy the job police officers do and commend them, but scenes like this encourage the idiotic and reprehensible call to defund the police. Do not give ammunition to the idiots. The final stage of One News reporting is the fear-mongering, insinuating that it's all going to get worse.
It will go higher day on day to the peak.
This is a key element of the daily COVID update, but more recently we've seen it take the form of threats of military intervention to obstruct the people's right to protest.
The council and the police are now having to re-strategise how to remove some of these very large vehicles, and we understand that the army may get involved.
Just imagine how the rest of the free world will mock us for using the military to silence a protest. Oh wait, we don't have to imagine it. We just have to remember what happened in Australia.
troops will be sent into the suburbs to curb the runaway virus. They'll be checking on the households as residents wake up to harsh new rules.
And Australia is basically a prison colony again.
In conclusion, we must communicate peacefully and respect the democratic process. Our politicians need to step up and instigate a referendum. We all need to be compassionate and peaceful.
I'm leaving my husband. He got the booster today. He's gone. I don't want anything to do with him. I seriously believe he's going to die. That's getting off topic.